All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Dunlap. I would like to call the Mobility and Transportation Infrastructure Commission to order. Mark, will you please call the roll?
Yes, we have Chair Dunlap.
Here.
Vice Chair Hughes,
Here.
Commissioner Fisher,
Here.
Commissioner Abelson,
Here.
Commissioner Zavala.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And we have City Council Liaison Donovan here also
Here.
with us today. Commissioner Fisher, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Sir. You all stand, face the flag, put your hand over your right hand over your heart. You ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Our first agenda item is general public comment. So these are items that are not on tonight's agenda, but that members of the public would like to speak on either in person or on Zoom that are under the purview of the commission. We'll have 3 minutes per speaker. We'll start with the in-person public comment first, and then if you're on Zoom, I think the best way is to raise your hand, right? So if you're on Zoom and you want to give public comment, please raise your hand. So Mark, will you please call our public commenters?
So we'll start off with the in-person public comments. We have Tucker Nelson.
This is general public comment. Not on the scope of work. Well, once we get okay. Thank you. Sorry about that confusion.
Our next speaker, Michael Ten.
And the red light should be on if you push the button.
If I push the button.
Yeah. You may go.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Good evening, commissioners. Since I got 3 minutes, I'll make it quick. Back in around 2005, we worked on closing Rollins Street for the middle school. And part of closing Rollins Street for the middle school so they could expand the gym were some mitigation efforts that were made around the middle school to make sure kids stayed safe as they were pedestrians around the middle school. I saw in the reviews talked about pedestrian safety is really important. Schools back this week. A couple little elements from that mitigation effort seem to have been removed since COVID. I'm concerned that you can't have a policeman on every corner. You cannot have a safety crossing guard at every corner, because I know that's an issue too. But those obstacles or delineators, visual barriers that were there to help augment keeping kids in the correct corridor. So if there's a chance that staff and Antenna knows me that there's a couple elements that are still missing, that disappeared, that will help keep kids safe in that corridor. For a fact, I was the coordinator for the parent volunteers for the middle school for 8 years while my kids were going through there, and it overlapped with my term on the city council. So that's it. Let's see, minute and 30. I guess the term was never let a tragedy go to waste. Well, we had a tragedy this last Saturday, or was it Saturday night into Sunday? And I know I communicated to Larry because I put him on a commission many, many years ago, and I'm glad to see that he's still involved. Maybe someday it'd be Councilman Larry. But the key is December of 2020, I was in communication with the current director of public works then. I was asked by citizens in that corridor to try to get involved because nothing was happening in that corridor. A lot of the design deficiencies of that corridor comes back to, you're even talking about the mitigation of Fair Oaks. Well, it was part of that project. Orange Grove was the first initial project of mitigating the 710 freeway. Orange Grove, Fair Oaks, and then it went to the hook ramp and freeway off ramp. There are some elements that I didn't agree with when we put it in, but they let it stand because that was the design. But as you can see, if you look at the condition of the trees, 20 years have gone by and most of those trees are immature because they've all been mowed down. Some of the trees aren't even there anymore. It's because of the design of the lanes, design of the thing. I sent then director, Mr. Garrett. His first name was Garrett, I think. And I gave it to Larry of the presentation I made for him. So he has a copy of it. Hopefully he'll forward to you. Hopefully that'll start the discussion to
Thank you.
work on those efforts to improve that, because unfortunately somebody lost their life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next public comment?
We have Gino Thomas.
Press anything? Okay. My name is Gino Thomas. I live at 339 Grand Avenue, northwest corner of Grand and Hermosa. Lived in South Pass for 18 years and at this house for 8 years. Why is South Pasadena making these changes to Grand and Hermosa? The changes made to Grand and Hermosa make me less safe. I walk my dog on Hermosa almost every day. There are no sidewalks on Hermosa leading up to Columbia, and pushing the car traffic farther to the side leaves less room for pedestrians and makes the street unsafe. We will have more accidents on Hermosa with these changes. Further down, before the sidewalks start, the cars will have to start swerving to avoid the curb pushouts in the middle of Hermosa. What about the pedestrians? What about the cyclists? The changes have narrowed the streets, putting pedestrians and cyclists closer to cars. The pushouts will lead to accidents. What is the point of the curb pushouts at the Grand Hermosa intersection? Hermosa west of Grand is very narrow already. Motorists must stop to make the turn onto Hermosa. We do not need plastic curb pushouts to make them stop. The geometry of the street makes them stop. And Hermosa east of Grand is fairly narrow. And having lived on the corner for 8 years, I have seen that everybody stops before they turn off of Grand. They have to. The plastic curb pushouts do nothing. Are we safer with these pushouts? Why did South Pasadena install these plastic curb pushouts? During yesterday's 10 a.m. meeting, I heard no logical, rational reason for the changes made to Grand and Hermosa. If I understood correctly, the changes were not made for any particular reason, not to slow down traffic, not to reduce the number of accidents. In fact, how many accidents have occurred on Grand and Hermosa in the last 10 years? Didn't get an answer to that yesterday. I keep hearing the word temporary, but it was very vague. When are they scheduled to go back to where we were? Can we firm this up to a date certain? For example, an email to all affected stating that the measures will be removed no later than, say, March 18th, the last full day of winter. And please help us move this date to tomorrow or the next day as soon as possible. Finally, I was rather surprised to hear, and hopefully I misunderstood, but I was surprised to hear that Public Works basically seems to think they can do projects like this without even consulting those of us who are most affected. Is this true? I didn't hear about this until a week ago, and then it's done. The last work was done during the 10 a.m. meeting yesterday, by the way. One reason I like living in South Pasadena is that it is small enough that residents can talk to City Hall and hopefully have at least some say in how things are done here. The way these changes to Grand and Hermosa were made without any input from those of us affected is very depressing. After the changes on Grand and Hermosa are reversed, what can we do to make sure that we are not blindsided by the next quote, unquote improvement? Thank you.
Thank you. And next public comment?
Ann Miller.
My name is Ann Miller. I've lived on Grand, 634 Grand for 38 years. This morning, before 8 o'clock, they were jackhammering holes at the corner of Sterling and Grand. It looks like you're going to put those silly poles up for turning right there. It's hardly anybody turns there. That's ridiculous. Most of the bikers that come down Grand come in the morning. I wonder if this commission has even been there in the morning to see how many bikers come down. 5 across. It's rare that they will go single file. I object to the bike lanes. Cars are not stopping at the stop sign at Charter Oak and Grand. I live on the corner. After the Zoom meeting yesterday, I went out to do some errands. 2 cars came racing down Charter Oak, made a right turn, didn't look. One car had to put on their brakes going north on Grand. When I came back after my errands, same thing happened, only this time it was a biker that had to suddenly stop. Can you please do something with that stop sign? People do not stop. Charter Oak is a main thoroughfare for people coming and going to the freeway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Robert Simpson.
Hello, I'm here. I have some questions about the Grand Bike Lane. And some of the problems that we have. I know they're supposedly doing it temporarily, but I think when they did Marengo, that was temporary, and any other bike lane we have is quote temporary. So I don't think it's going to try to be temporary. But I'm just worried about, because we're self-insured and the vicarious liability that we could be involved in by having the lanes, and then people, I have a truck, so if I park my truck legally, it's still, the mirror still sticks in the bike lane. So now we're forcing people out of the bike lane into the street. And I'm kind of worried about that as far as problems down the street. Also with Hermosa and Grand, with the plates up there, I don't know if that's temporarily again, but quite an eyesore. I don't know if you've driven by or had a chance to drive by. And I think if you want to slow down the traffic or anything, that they can run radar. In the 70s, I was an officer here and I ran radar on Grand and I caught an 84 and a 25. So it could be used if you want to do that to slow down people a bit more. And then the last thing I have is, I know you're not allowed to comment on it, but I don't know what that is. I don't know. I'll tell you where it is. It's at Oak and Myland. I can give you a copy. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but the bottom line is it forces the people out of the center of the street into the curb. And if we have bicycles, I would imagine a lot of bicycles. I used to live on Roland, and a lot of bicycles go down go down Oak, and it just forces them into maybe hitting bikes or whatever. So I don't know who our consultant is. We brought that up and they were talking about maybe using the money or reviewing the consultant's idea, because if that's a good idea, I give up. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Chris Miller.
Hello, High Commission, Council Member. So I am a parent here in South Pasadena. I regularly drive around, I regularly bike around, regularly walk around, both by myself and with small children. So I think I'm very attuned to the needs to have safe streets for us, our children, for people of all ages. And so I want to make a comment regarding the Grand Avenue bike lane project, but I actually don't really want to comment on the specific design and whether it's good, whether it's bad. I just, I want to remind everyone, certainly not the commissioners here, but the people of South Pasadena, that this has been a process that's been years in the making. City staff has worked incredibly hard and been very creative about finding a way to put in a project that is temporary, that will allow us to get some direct feedback from residents. I understand that there is a program that they're going to be deploying whereby residents throughout the city can give their feedback on individual intersections, like some of the ones that were just mentioned, on the program as in general, whether we want bikers at all, whatever anyone wants to share. And I think that's a really great process. I understand that it's probably frustrating for people that see a sudden change to their street. I'm on Oak Street, so felt very sudden to me. But I think it'll be really interesting as we go through this over the period, which I believe from meetings that I've reviewed to be 6 months, but hopefully we can get some information on that. I think it'll be really interesting as people get some experience with it. whether that's, again, driving, biking, walking, what have you, I think we'll get some really, really interesting feedback, and then, that will then be passed to council. And I think that that's a great process. I think we should really stick to that. And let's not get distracted by the understandable frustration of some members of the community who want to see this project kind of wrapped up ahead of time. So again, really commend you on that process, and hope to see it go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have any more public comment in person, but we have 3 public comments via Zoom. We have Joseph Chen. I'm going to unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Hello,
Hello, we can hear you. Go ahead.
can
Mr.
you hear
Chen.
me? Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. I would like to speak in opposition of the markings on Grand Avenue. I live at 309 Grand Avenue and been there for over 13 years. The issue of the line on and the markings, the high contrast markings on Grand Avenue first came up at the time when the lines were painted on Marengo by the school there. At that time, prior to the implementation of any sort of study, the Grand Avenue residents were notified, and there was substantial community opposition led by Kathy Offenhauser and other members of the Grand Avenue neighborhood. The concerns at that time are still the same concerns that we have now. As my neighbor Gino Thomas pointed out, there is poor rationale for the purpose of the lines, so it's unclear whether this is for pacification of traffic, control of cyclists, or reduction of accidents. And certainly there does not appear to be any data in regards to accident reduction, specifically on Grand, as I believe it is a fairly safe street. And the use of markings in general is a controversial topic in public safety circles, especially from the standpoint of unprotected bike lanes. The current implementation of the so-called temporary project was characterized by very poor communications with the residents. And I think that the amount of comment from my neighbors is certainly demonstrates the lack of communications. So sort of remarking to I believe Chris Miller's comments, the issue is that one can sort of be easily encourage a project that's done in somebody else's front yard. But I think that if it was your own front yard, I think you might feel quite different about it. I think one of the issues is that
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Your time is up.
Our next individual is Yvonne De La Rose. I will unmute you now.
Thank you. I am coming to you not about the Grand Avenue issue, but I am coming to you because I remember there was a city council meeting where the subject of supplemental transportation services, supplemental to dial-a-ride, are being looked into, and there are plans to implement that. I have some information to offer as guidance from direct experience with several of the rideshare services, and I would like to know which in addition to the MTech Commission, which commissions should be included in the comments and information that I have to offer? Should Planning Commission be included, Community Services, Public Works? I'm not clear on which commissions would be involved in this. And I don't want to overwhelm, but I do believe that the information is very, very necessary so that we can provide what has been deemed in the housing element, high quality transportation in South Pasadena. So is there someone who can help me identify which are the right commissions to contact in order to provide the information? And that's my request.
Ms. LaRose will ask someone on staff to follow up with you with the additional item. Antenna raised his hand on the correct commissions for you to follow up with.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We next have Jamie S. I just unmuted you.
Jamie, you may.
Yeah, hi,
proceed.
great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Jamie Sobieski. I live at 521 Grand Avenue. I am not in favor of the bike lanes as they sit right now for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that the bike lanes, I guess, are suggested to be a slow street or a safe street instrument, but there's no data on that for Grand Avenue. You know, 1.75 miles of a road that goes really to nowhere to Pasadena. There's no data that says it makes it safer. The bike lanes are unprotected, so bikers who are riding in the bike lanes, are pushed to the edge of where the parked cars are, creating an interface between the people who are getting in and out of cars, the people who are riding in the bikes, and then of course the cars are pushed to the center where you'd obviously have bikes jumping in and out of the bike lanes to get away from the cars. And so all of that seems very unnecessary for a street like Grand. There's just doesn't seem to be enough data to show this is the right approach if what we're doing is trying to have safer streets. It also seems to me like if what South Pasadena is trying to do is to implement a safer street model with more line painting or protected bike lanes or unprotected bike lanes, the correct place for this would be somewhere like Mission, El Centro, Fremont, these other thoroughfare roads where there are not bike lanes, but there is intense traffic and really a purpose for bikes where a biker would want to go from a business district to the schools to back to the shopping districts and get around town, as opposed to a small residential boulevard street like Grand, where once you start to put pavement and painting and the rest of it out there, it becomes a very narrow street without any data. My last piece of item to talk about is Pasadena on Grand Avenue has used speed bumps to slow traffic. And it seems like for our boulevard, that may be a significantly better approach. But I would urge a city council to look to data in terms of making these kinds of decisions. As my final and closing item, I really think we're all in this together. And I really appreciate the council for looking for ways to make our streets safer. And I certainly am in favor of that. I'm just not sure painting lines is the way to go.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have one more individual. We have Stephen Koch. I've just unmuted you.
Hi, yeah, it's Steve Koch. I was part of the listening session meetings that went on yesterday, and I was one of the people that kind of helped organize reaction to the bike lanes on Grand Avenue that happened last week. And as opposed to getting into a lot of specifics about our comments, the issues that we had, I just wanted to ask if the committee would please look into the comments that were made, or it was, probably 3 hours of comments yesterday. And I hope you guys will be able to take a look at that, to see those comments, and also just to consider the way that you had gone after getting the input of residents on Grand. And I suppose it's true for the other streets as well, like Oak Street. So that's it. That was my only comment tonight.
Thank you. And last chance, Mark, any other general public comment?
We do not have any hands raised. We do have some public comment, but from future items.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who came out and provided public comment tonight. Certainly not convenient, but we appreciate everyone coming up and speaking up and providing their perspective on the Grand project, as well as other issues throughout the city. Thank you. With that, we will go to agenda item 2, State Route 110 Fair Oaks Interchange Project, environmental impact report and environmental assessment and environmental impact statement. That's a mouthful. I believe we have a presentation by Public Works, Mr. Pena.
Good evening, Chair Dunlap and Commissioners. Good evening to all of you. Good to see you again. Today we bring you the following item: the State Route 110 Fair Oaks Interchange Project, Environmental Impact Report, Environmental Assessment. We wanted to give you guys an update on this specific project. So the recommendation that we're bringing forward to the Commission today is to recommend the City Council to move forward with the first step of the project approval, an environmental document phase, and recommend to initiate discussions with Caltrans and LA Metro to determine preliminary concurrence and request to utilize mobility improvement projects MIP funds for the PED phase, and initiate the funding agreement process with LA Metro and establish a timeline for this specific project. So I'm going to start off with the presentation and just give you an overview and background on the project. So if we can go to the first slide. So just an overview of some of the things that I'm just going to cover. I'm going to do an aerial map of the area, some background information, some of the existing conditions on Fair Oaks, discussion analysis, the scope of work, some of the alternatives that the consultant is going to consider as part of this, this work, as well as the project costs and the working hours, and then what would be the following steps after this. We can go to the next slide. So this is an aerial map of the Fair Oaks interchange. These are some of the existing conditions. So we currently have a number of on-ramps and off-ramps at Fair Oaks Avenue. On the northwest corner, we have the southbound on-ramp for Fair Oaks. On the southwest corner, we have the off-ramp for the SR 110 at Fair Oaks. And then if you look on the northeast corner, we have an abandoned off-ramp that used to be located, was abandoned, I believe, in the 1950s after Raymondale Hill was developed. And there's also another off-ramp closer to the north side of State Street. It's a southbound off-ramp on Fair Oaks as well. So we can go to the next slide. So just some background information of how we got to this point. When LA Metro and Caltrans were studying the 710 gap, in conjunction, they determined that there was they conducted an environmental process which resulted in a locally preferred option, which was transportation system management and transportation demand management for all the local cities that were affected or within the area affected of the 710. So that was back in 2017 when that EIR was certified, and that was determined by Metro's board of director to adopt the local preferred option at that time. So between 2018 and 2019, LA Metro programmed around $70 million for South Pasadena with a focus on the interchange modifications. In 2020, city staff initiated a request for a proposal for a preliminary drawing of a loop ramp, which was also part of the attachment and part of the agenda. And then now coming back to today, the scope of work was developed by one of our on-call consultants, HNTB, which is what we're presenting today, the scope of work of this consultant. Next slide. So just some of the existing conditions on Fair Oaks. But some of the challenges that are present is that there are too many exclusive signal phase movements at this intersection, at Gravelia, at State, at the off-ramp, going northbound and going southbound as well. During peak periods, pedestrian waiting times can be excessive. During AM and PM vehicle delays north to south on Fair Oaks, or when turning left southbound on the 110. There's also regional delays and all in the area due to the queuing on Gravelia when vehicles are trying to turn southbound on the 110 off ramp. Given that you have a limited amount of space to make a left turn on that left turn pocket, even though it's a double lane, you have limited space. I think is about 85 feet, and you can fit around maybe 8 vehicles to make that left turn going southbound on the 110. You also have conflicting turning movements for vehicles and ADA sidewalk ramp issues on Gravelia. There's turning conflicts at Gravelia when you're trying to go northbound on Fair Oaks. We also, as part of the one of the other grants that the city of South Pasadena has received, we also have a project where we're doing improvements along Fair Oaks. It's the ITS project. That has been partially implemented. We're working on signal synchronization, vehicle detection, and for bike and transit priority, just to try to alleviate some of the traffic in the area. But some of these measures will not resolve a lot of the issues or challenges that they're existing right now at that intersection. Next slide. So just going into the scope of work, as I mentioned earlier, HNTB will be the primary lead consultant. Part of this also includes 12 sub-consultants, which are going to be assisting with the project at different stages. So, some of them are, going to include specifically, the noise study, cultural study, historic study, Native American coordination, as well as visual and aesthetics. So just a number of consultants working at different phases of the project. And part of the scope is to conduct 3 primary tasks. One of them being project management and develop a purpose project and alternative. So this whole project or this scope is scheduled to last approximately 3 years, which will include an alternative analysis of all the proposed alternatives that they have. It's going to involve a coordination kickoff meetings, weekly meetings with the consultant, as well as external agencies, including City of South Pasadena staff, and also an interagency coordination meetings and setting up a work schedule for the entire project. The next task that they are tasked to do is a project approval document. So the project area that they're looking at is from Glen Arm on the 110 all the way to Orange Grove, but it also includes up to 12 on-ramps and or intersections within the area. And part of that also includes a draft project report, which would determine the constructability of these alternatives, as well as comparative costs, staging impacts, and evaluating alternatives to then prepare a draft project report. The next task that they have to do would be the environmental studies, which would be more the technical studies, which would be the traffic studies, noise study, cultural heritage study, historic, Native American, coordination, visual aesthetics, and paleo studies and research as well. And then part of this process also includes a circulation of the draft environmental document and responding to all the comments that the public makes, and also refining a lot of these alternatives as the consultant moves in different stages of each of these alternatives. They will be refined as they move along forward. And as all of this is eventually finalized, certain alternatives are going to be advanced to the design to complete the future design of whatever decision is made. Next slide. And just to talk about some of the alternatives that are in the scope of work, as part of the CEQA process, one of them is being the no build, basically meaning the status quo, no change, keeping the existing conditions. Another the alternative that they're looking at would be the hook ramp at Fair Oaks, or better known now as the loop ramp, which part of the scope also recognizes that there will be exceptions to the current Caltrans design standards, given that there's limitations at the current area where this is being proposed. Another alternative that they'll be looking at is a diamond ramp at Fair Oaks. Alternative 4, relocation modification of the State Street ramp. Also TSM and TDM improvements, including transit enhancements, complete streets, and parallel route improvements. Some of those other improvements can also include, ITS improvement, signal synchronization, some of the stuff that we're already doing on Fair Oaks, and also intersection improvements at different areas within the city as well. And other, similar to other local cities, some of the other improvements that they're doing at a intersection level as well. And then finally, alternative 6, design refinements to improve safety. These wouldn't be necessarily standalone. So eventually the consultant, based on the alternative analysis that they conduct, then they would move forward with 2 or 3 of these alternatives to then move forward with the next step of the process. Next slide. And then just to give you some of the project costs and the work hours. So the consultant, HNTB, the cost associated just primarily for the primary subconsultant to do this work is around $3.5 million. And they're expected to, they're projecting approximately 17,000 work hours to produce all this preparation for this phase. In addition to that, the 12 subconsultants in totality, the costs associated with that would be close to $900,000 with 5,836 of work hours. So in total, the total cost of this phase would be $4.3 million with expected 22,000, approximately 22,000 hours of work. So just to let you know again, what has been programmed as part of the grant that Metro has distributed, we have $70 million. And so this is $4.3 million for this phase of the environmental stage that is being asked for. So the next steps as of right now, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for a recommendation from the commission to provide us feedback on the next phase of this scope of work that we're presenting to you here today. The subsequent step after that would be to meet with Caltrans and also LA Metro and with any other agency such as the State Historic Preservation Offsite or the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation as well, to determine also any of the challenges in coordination at the initial steps. And then finally, after we get that feedback, then we would schedule at a future meeting this item and present this as a task order to the LA City Council at a future meeting. And then I think that concludes the presentation. So
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Before we jump into questions, can I just ask one kind of overall question around the scope of work?
Sure.
I'll kind of make this in.
Chair, we might have a public comment.
Oh, should we go to, let's go to public comment.
Yes, we actually do have public comment. We have Tucker Nelson.
Thank you. Tucker, how could I forget? Good to see you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, is this on? Okay. This is first time I've read a scope of work, so some of my concerns may be non-issues. As a side note, I prefer fewer abbreviations, taking it down to just initials. Also, I would like to have a formal collaboration with organizations who have experience with bicycle and pedestrian traffic improvements, such as active SGV. All right, the first section is project background and objective. It states the city of South Pasadena is considering a redesign of the hook ramps. I object to hook ramps rather than stating a redesign of the interchange. Because I don't know that we are set on the hook ramp because he's talking about alternatives. Section 2, statement of work. 6 alternatives are listed on the page, and then it goes down to 3 alternatives. And I don't understand why 3 of them are just gone. Throughout the tasks, city is mentioned. That city will do this or city will review that. Does that mean city staff or the public? In section 2.2, which is update purpose and need, up to 2 meetings with city and Caltrans. Up to 2 meetings means it could be 0 or 1. Also, I feel 2 meetings are way insufficient to get public input on this. Section 2.4.4, traffic forecasting and modeling. Does this include forecasting traffic on Fair Oaks and Gravalia and all the other side streets? Because there could be backups. And does the traffic forecasting and modeling include bicyclists and pedestrians? Section 2.5, transportation management plan. Also section 2.8. Does this section include where the construction equipment will be stored when not in use? There is very little surface area that's not in use in that area. 2.6, improvement opportunities will be identified only along adjacent arterials. Does that mean they're not going to be improvements for bicycles and pedestrians will not be identified in the interchange itself? Section 2.7 and 2.8. Now we're down to 1 build alternative with possibly minimal or no public input during this entire process, according to my reading, my interpretation. 2.15, structures planning, also 2.16. There is a bridge plan for widening the existing structure. I am very glad to see that. We're going to widen it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your thorough review. I think I saw staff writing down those those comments. Maybe before we jump into commissioner questions, I kind of have an overall question. I think kind of relates to the public comment. I do kind of think of this as something we're all familiar with, the Bachelorette, and that we have these 6 alternatives, and then we're going to go through all these stages and eventually be down to 1. How can you kind of give an overview of the scope of work? And it looks like we're starting to 6, and then I kind of had the same question. We're immediately down to 3. We start with 6, and then how many are modeled? Like what are those decision points? And maybe if you could provide some context with that, and then
yeah, so staff also had some additional questions. I don't think this is would be the final scope of work. There will be refinements to the scope. We're definitely going to be sitting down with the consultant to make some refinements and get further clarifications on some of the things. But just going based off the scope of work that they share with us as part of the alternative analysis, and that initial stage is when they're analyzing a lot of these are 6 alternatives at some point during that process, which we can definitely get clarification for the commission and everyone else. They will determine which of these alternatives will move to the next stage and how that would involve public engagement as well as the commission in that process.
How many will go to the next phase?
How many will go to the next phase? Well, based on the scope of work, I believe it's right now they're considering 3, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's set to be only 3 and these specific 3. That's what I just want to get, clarify.
Okay.
So a decision hasn't been made that these specific 3 alternatives are going to be the ones that are going to advance. I mean, it's just depending on the analysis that they do.
Okay, so there are 6 alternatives. Right
Yeah.
now, the scope of work narrows it down to 3.
Yeah.
But in other words, those are not the 3 we're committing to. Like those will be deleted from the scope of work.
No, yeah, well, we're not,
It'll be 3
from
of
my
these
understanding,
6.
yeah, we're not necessarily committing to that. It's going to be based on, how we finalize the scope of work as well.
Okay, and then what's the next phase after that? Once you go to the 3?
Once you go to the next 3. So that's task number 2, which we would develop the no build alternatives or build alternatives, and they go into the draft project report where they determine the feasibility of a lot of these alternatives, whether they look at the constructability, the costs associated with them, and then they go into the 35% design just to try to make a better informed decision whether you're going to move one of these alternatives to the next stage or not.
Okay,
If that
so
clarifies.
you take 3 to that phase.
Yeah.
And then feasibility, design, and then you go to the environmental determination.
Yeah, well, the environmental would be the 3rd task
Okay,
of this scope of work.
and how many go to environmental? 3,
Uh,
all 3, or
You know what? I don't want to.
okay,
Let me get back to you on that
okay,
one.
but that's the general
Sure.
process, and then
Yes.
it slowly filters down, I guess, to
Yes.
whatever the preferred alternative is. All right, so I'll turn over to my fellow commissioners for questions. Who wants to kick us off or get started?
I'll go.
Vice Chair Hughes, go ahead.
Well, first, thank you, David, for presentation. Thank you for the comments, Ms. Nelson. Just going back a little bit and some background. These original projects had to be submitted by December 2017 for Metro dollars. All the cities in the region needed to submit projects, which we did. The potential of the ramp was something that the city wanted to do for many, many years, but there was never any funding for it. And the designs had originally been done decades ago to really improve the bottleneck that we have. So we submitted our project list. We were on time and we were recognized by Metro for the funds. And so we're 6 years in and we have not done anything much yet. And one of the issues are now we're down to $65.7 million if we count the money that we are earmarking for these steps. And one of the questions is, which was part of the discussion back 6 years ago, was how much it's going to cost to actually execute the project and the potential designs. So one of the concerns I have is, one, how are we looking at the funding to actually do the project should we get to that decision? And how long will Metro continue to hold the funds for us as we go through this next 3-year project before we even get to the final decision of are we going to break ground or not? So I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned as they develop this, whether there's cognizance on how we look at building it. And if they think about it, whether we're using recycled materials, what can we do for the environmental efficiency and sustainability of the project and the mitigated projects that might be associated right at that intersection and corridor. And I agree that we need to really have a lot of outreach for this because it's been something that's been for many, many years on the back burner. And we know that we've got huge emission problems with the delays that we currently experience at that bottleneck intersection. So I just want to bring some timeframes in, some concerns on the funding. And as we go down this path, I don't want us to get again where we were years ago and say, we've done all this work, but we can't move forward because we have no funds. And this is big chunks of money. And we were able to get the 70 million. And I just want to, plus the other 10 that's sitting there, because I believe there's 80 altogether, that it's going to be protected as we go, it'll be 10 years practically before we really do anything or get it all done. So I'm worried about that we'll lose those funds. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Pena, do you have?
I just want to say that, we share some of that same sentiment, and we are looking at the funds as well. We are trying to coordinate with Metro. We were reviewing the what has been allocated for City of South Pasadena. We're looking at the fiscal year where how they separated the funding, and they staggered it over the next, I think, up into 2028. So I can definitely follow up on the funding, because the next step would be the actual funding agreement with LA Metro to determine, when we're going to expend those funds as well. The total cost.
We're using, in essence, it's kind of like almost a 5% we're using of our total budget just for this study.
Yeah, and that's a question that we're still gonna pose to Metro, whether we can use part of this this pot of money for this phase of the project, and that'll be our next step to coordinate with LA Metro.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Abelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David, thank you for a terrific presentation. I'm just going to go through the notes and questions I have first on the staff report and then going into the proposal in no particular order. So first, part of this overall project is replacement of the signal equipment and hardware on Fair Oaks. That's a project. Is that part of this project or part of a different project? And I'm going to ask questions, and if you don't know the answer, it's okay. I just want to make sure we're thinking about these things. Is that part of?
Were you referencing the staff report or?
No, this was actually before I got to the staff report.
Oh, okay.
I know part of some project, and I believe it's part of what's being funded through Measure R, is the replacement of the signal equipment all along Fair Oaks. Director Gerber has told us about that. I was just wondering if you knew anything more about that and whether that's part of this particular project and study.
You know what? I don't know the answer to that one, but I don't want to misspeak on that one. So
Okay.
I thought that was part of the repurpose Rogan funds, the $10 million.
yes, that's
a
correct.
separate
Separate.
project.
Yeah, that's totally separate.
Okay.
Sorry, I got.
No
confused.
worries. Okay, now going to the report. And some of the questions I have were ones that our commenter brought up, which I appreciate. So going to the staff report, the bottom of the second page of the report, item 1, it talks about evaluating options, developing purpose and need. And it talks in there about the consultant will develop base alternatives and options for initial evaluation to ensure that every potential solution and option is evaluated early and given due consideration. So I just wanted to understand how that comment intersects with this 6 alternative list that's in the proposal. Are we looking at every single possible alternative to deal with the problems at this intersection, or is the focus on these 6 alternatives?
Well, I believe when the consultant provided this scope of work, it was just providing an assumption of these alternatives that were going to potentially be further analyzed. This is not to say that this is the final product and we can't make recommendations on changes. To your question, whether they're going to look at every single potential solution, we can get further clarification on the language that they're using as part of the scope of work, and we can certainly get back to you just to get make that clear what that exactly entails. So it's not conflicting language as stating 6 alternatives rather than
Right.
looking at every possible solution.
And I prefer the
Yeah.
6 alternatives over at the every single possible solution because we'll be here for the next 20 years. So I just wanted to understand that. Page 3 of the report, under item 3, environmental studies and environmental document. Towards the end, it says, public stakeholder coordination and engagement, which is terrific, would include at a minimum a scoping meeting and a public hearing as part of the environmental process. Just wondering, would there be a hearing before this commission, or those would be meetings or hearings outside of our meetings? Or we don't know yet?
For those, I don't know. I also had questions about the public stakeholder, as one of the residents made comments on that as well, of how that's going to be, conducted. So we are going to get further clarification on the outreach and just the public stakeholder meetings, because we feel that is definitely an important part of this phase, especially for a large project like this. It is going to involve some community engagement, and we want to get that clarified with the consultant as well.
Perfect, thank you. And to Commissioner Hughes's point, I noticed, and you mentioned the 3-year duration of this effort, which will lead to the environmental documents.
Yes.
Seems like a long time. Yeah. Maybe it's not in the scheme of things or relative to the amount of work that's involved, but sounds like a long time. And my concern was, okay, that's 3 years on top of what's already happened or not happened. How much time has already passed? So I'm just wondering, from a timing perspective, are we okay with regard to the ability to access and use all of these funds and build the project within the time allotted?
So part of when we execute a funding agreement with LA Metro, they usually have like a project manager that oversees specific grants. And in my experience in working with a specific project manager, provided that we are keeping them up to date in the progress of the project, then we can certainly have, discussions of how we can continue through the process of our funding agreement and ensuring that we don't lapse or we don't lose any funds. So those conversations are always ongoing. We'd had similar situations in the past where we do talk with some of the project managers, and there's always some room where we can work, provided that we just don't give any updates or we don't expend anything. We just have to keep them apprised, because they do inform us, or they usually send out a letters telling us that we're delayed or we're going to lapse in some of the funds. So we're going to continue having that dialogue with Metro.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate your sensitivity to that. Almost done. So in the scope of work, what I was previously referring to as the proposal, a couple questions. So under the statement of work, we have the 6 alternatives. The third one, so you explained that the hook ramp is the loop ramp, right? That's alternative 2. And then the third alternative is diamond ramp at Fair Oaks. I haven't heard that term before. Could you explain what that is?
Mark, can you go back to the map? All right, so I'm just going to try to explain as best as I can. I'm not a traffic engineer, but from my understanding, I haven't seen a visual representation of this specific alternative. Again, I have questions of my own, which we're going to set up another meeting with the consultant after this. But from my understanding, is that it would be a diamond ramp at Fair Oaks. As you see, you have an off-ramp, an abandoned off-ramp at the northeast corner. So I think the idea is to have either an off-ramp or an on-ramp at that location, and then potentially one at Gravelia. Again, I'm making assumptions, but this is based on how it's described as a diamond ramp. Is usually a diamond that's created at that intersection for the on-ramps and off-ramps. So I don't have a visual to kind of represent that, but that's my understanding. But again, we can get further clarification, because I had questions of my own for that specific alternative, and not just that one.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, I feel better. Thank you. I had the same question about 6 alternatives to 3. You've already addressed it. I had the same comment as the commenter about the up to 2 meetings with the city and Caltrans to refine purpose and need. That's section 2.2. We should probably just get clarity on, is it up to 2 meetings with each of these agencies? Are these combined meetings? Just exactly what we're talking about or they're proposing in 2.2. 2.4.2, which talks about the study area. It says between Glen Arm and Orange Grove. I didn't know what that meant. Your map, which is the one you have up right now, is helpful.
Okay.
But maybe a little more definition around this, what the study area is.
I agree.
That would be great. And maybe I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Last one. There's some others, but I'll pass on them. 3.21, which is the last page of the scope of work. It talks about response to review comments. So it says, the consultant will review all comments received during this period, assumes no more than 100 comments to be addressed. So this is the city of South Pasadena, and I think 100 might be a little conservative. You might want to think about a significantly higher number. I'm not going to, give you one, but maybe with more digits.
I don't
be
disagree with you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pena, for your presentation. I think you answered one of the questions that Larry brought up that I was thinking about, the diamond ramp at Fair Oaks. And I guess as you described it, it would be 4 ramps, 2 on ramps, 2 off ramps, 2 on, 2 off.
From my understanding of a diamond ramp, yes, again,
Okay.
but I'm gonna get that clarified.
Okay.
So I don't wanna,
Sure.
misspeak.
And when you refer to the base alternative, is that the drawing we see following page MTIC 6?
You mean this one here?
Yes, is it possible to bring that up on the screen?
Oh, can you bring this?
If not, that's okay.
Yeah.
So are you confirming that is what is referred to as the base alternative?
You know what? I'm not sure if that would be the base alternative, but it is one of the alternatives that's gonna be part of the alternative analysis. The one that is being presented that's gonna be projected on here.
Okay, well, you presented 6 different alternatives.
Yes.
And are you saying they're all, okay? I guess my point is, if that is the base, that's fine with me.
Okay.
But want to make sure we understand that not all alternatives are equal.
No,
For
exactly.
example, you
No.
described the diamond ramp at Fair Oaks, which would supposedly have 4 legs of a new diamond interchange, a tight diamond. We know those don't operate too well, but you have to evaluate it. So
Absolutely.
I just wanted to bring up the point that alternative 2 is not equal to alternative 4. So it's been my understanding through our previous discussions that what we're looking at is the base alternative. So if my thinking is wrong on that, I'd like to be so advised. My understanding is that HNTB has shown in the past that they're very creative in developing design alternatives or design exceptions and working with Caltrans. Do you know if that's the case or?
I personally don't know, but we
Okay.
can circle back on that.
Well, that's what
Okay.
Public Works Director Gerber told me when this project was given to HNTB. And I think we know from the very outset, and in fact, HNTV developed this alternative
Yes.
from earlier sketches that I provided, and they've enhanced it several times in order to meet certain design concerns. I think we know from the get-go that if we were to meet modern highway design manual guidelines in the Caltrans Highway Design Manual, that the on-ramp we'd be looking at would take half the parking lot to the north, where Ace Hardware and
Correct.
Jersey Mike's, et cetera, are located, so that we have to look at reasonable design alternatives that meet the context of the Royal Seco Parkway. So what I would like to see somewhere in the development of this project, such as in number 1, project management and administrative options. And 2, project approval document, is some identification of the task ahead and looking for design exceptions. So I can develop some wording, but I think it would have to be revised to, reflect your document, but something like the consultant will coordinate closely with Caltrans in seeking reasonable design exceptions, period. Those design exceptions should ensure that the taking of private right-of-way is avoided and that the features reflect the context of the historic parkway. So I'd like to make sure that there's some identification of the task ahead of that we're not going to meet modern freeway design alternative guidelines, and that there will have to be design exceptions. But if they're deemed to be reasonable for this facility, the Royal Seco Parkway, then the consultant needs to work closely with Caltrans to meet that goal. So my input in this process is I'd like to see something that recognizes that in their scope of work and in the description of the project and the design options.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zavella?
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I do have a couple of different things I would like to bring up. One of them was regarding sort of because I'm looking at the what was included for like bike and pedestrian safety, and I noticed in the paragraph on page 3 of the mobility and transportation infrastructure code. Okay, item number 3, item number 2. Sorry, number 2. Item number 2, page 3, paragraph 2. It says that the corridor ITS project will also improve north to south traffic improvement with signal synchronization, queue detection system, infrared bike, pedestrian and vehicle detection, and adaptive pedestrian warning system, and transit system priority as well. And I guess I'm a little bit, I guess I'm just wondering if there's any specific accommodations that are going to be made for, say, like the sidewalk, and how that will be affected by the hook ramp, as well as if there's any accommodations for bikes at the moment in the works.
So I believe the project you're referencing, or those comments that you were reading off, were referring to the current Rogan fund that we have for the Fair Oaks project,
Yeah.
the ITS, those improvements.
Am I looking at the right thing here?
This is the staff report you're looking at.
Yeah, so I'm looking at, it's for item number 2 though, right? I feel like maybe I might be missing something. Maybe it's just went over my head.
You said page 2.
Yeah, I'm on the item number 3 agenda report. Yeah, actually, I'm sorry. That caused confusion.
So is it page 2 out of 4 at the top?
Page 3, actually. So It says MTech -3. So maybe this is different because it's
You mentioned item 3?
no, item number 2.
Okay,
Sorry,
item
I
number
know at the
2,
beginning
and
it said
then
wrong.
at the bottom where it says MTech / what page number are you referring to? 3?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah, so this is part of the Rogan Fund that we have, the $10 million. Where they're gonna do signal synchronization, queuing detection system. So that's
Oh,
the project that's still you know, in the first phase. So we're waiting for Caltrans to approve the environmental for that.
okay. I see my issue here.
Yeah.
My bad. So with that then, I guess my question is specifically for the hook ramp. Is there any accommodations for bikes and pedestrian safety essentially?
So
Yeah.
as part of the alternatives, there's also the TSM alternative number 5, which is the TSM TDM improvements, which would include like, you know, transit enhancement, complete streets, and as well as parallel route improvements. And that can range from different things. Like for instance, we're currently coordinating with LA Metro to do a signal priority for the bus on Fair Oaks on the line that we have running on Fair Oaks. So that is an alternative that they are going to analyze. And I think that it is going to give its fair analysis as well as one of the options to consider some of these other transportation means and working with the existing infrastructure that we have as part of like system management and as well as, you know, demand management to increase efficiency and capacity for different types of modes, which require like lower capital investments as well, which would be like, you know, bike lanes and pedestrians, because there's still also questions about pedestrian accessibility as well on whatever these alternatives or modifications that are made to the on-ramp at this location, because there could be potential conflicts as well with another on-ramp at that location closer to state. So we do also have some questions about that. So we'll definitely share those comments with the consultant when finalizing the scope of work.
Right. I guess the reason that I'm a little bit concerned about that is because remember in the past when it was brought up, you know, this hook ramp will be you know, changing the size of that street right there. And it'll also be taking out the sidewalk from what I recall. Is that correct? Maybe I might have missed something. Or it might be just adjusting the size of the street, the sidewalk. And I guess I don't want you know, the bike lanes that we have, say like on Raymond, to have this lack of continuity, which essentially kind of, it feels like there's a little bit of I guess what I'm trying to say is it's just it feels like there is a need for an accommodation there. And I feel like this could be an opportunity for us to sort of get the best of both worlds and somehow work out something.
You're referencing State Street right there, whether if it's going to be impacted. I think well, based on one of the alternatives on the loop ramp, the design that was in the one of the attachments, I believe what's going to be affected is the parking on the north side of State, from my understanding of this proposal. But we can certainly again relay some of these comments and concerns, you know, when finalizing the scope of work for the with the consultant.
Well, thank you very much for at least
Yeah.
addressing that. And I guess I'll keep on looking a little bit further. But thank you very much for your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zavala. Mr. Pena, I have a few questions. Thanks for walking me through all the alternatives, how we get from 6 down to 3, down to 1. Just when will we have input from Caltrans? and throughout this entire process regarding, we've talked about some of the design variations, with the 110 Parkway that will need to be made. When in this process do you think Caltrans will be at the table and they'll be able to provide
Well,
yay or nay on some of the design exceptions?
well, given that, there's going to be a significant change to that like abandoned off ramp, we're probably going to be working in close coordination with Caltrans a number of times. So as I mentioned earlier, part of the next step is to have these discussions with Caltrans to also get their concurrence and see how we navigate the next phase of this project as well. So there will be ongoing dialogue with Caltrans through this process because it's based on the scope of work. We're under the assumption that Caltrans may be the lead agency for this project as well, because there will be modifications to the Arroyo Parkway, which will definitely have historic impacts, which need to be, they'll have to call out or see if there will be any mitigations for that or not.
Okay, so it sounds like they're going to be at the table pretty early.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely before we get to project approval. And,
Yes.
start narrowing down alternatives.
Yeah, and we
Okay.
definitely want to have him at the onset of these conversations
Okay.
before we start moving to the next phases. It just wouldn't make sense to move to the next phase without having them involved in those conversations.
And you mentioned they might be a lead for this project.
Yes.
What does that mean? Like just in
So
oper-
certifying the CEQA document and helping us out as well through the CEQA process as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Minor comment on the collision data. I think they said 3 years of data. Just get everything available. I think you probably get up to 10. Why not? As far as the modeling goes, not to put anyone on the spot, but do you feel like you have the in-house expertise to review these models and understand? I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and I know that modeling can be pretty complicated and
Yeah.
complex. That they're using, I think, the SCAG regional model, and I think for something so specific like this project, it might be a bit of a crapshoot. But I don't really have enough experience with modeling to know if this is the right model or if someone gave it to me. Does this make sense or is it accurate? I don't want us to pay for something basically to do this big modeling exercise if we can't use it.
I don't have the answer to your question personally. I don't do modeling and don't have modeling experience, but that's probably an internal discussion we are going to have, between the public works director as well, and coordinating potentially as well with a project manager as well to also assist the city in analyzing a lot of this information as well. Someone who may be more, versed in some of this information.
Yeah, that might be
And-
a great question for
yeah.
Caltrans, because I know I've worked with some of the Caltrans modeling people on past projects, and they just have greater input on, when you should use, what types of model you should use, and when you should use them. On a past project, we were doing modeling, and it was such a small project that using the regional model didn't really make sense. So just to make sure that we're using the right model, so that we have good outcomes. Again, I want to reiterate what everyone said, the 2 stakeholder meetings is not enough. We got a demonstration project going on right now, and we received a lot of feedback on that. So I think ramp that up, as well as some sort of, I think this project's large enough to have a comms component, whether that be a website, regular communication. When they have a meeting, it should be recorded, so that people can go back and watch the meeting. Just extra transparent in this. Like, it's a lot of money. It's a really big project. So
I
some sort
agree.
of make that really, really accessible. And then lastly, Commissioner Zavala kind of brought it up. And looking at the loop ramp, I did kind of question like how a bicyclist or a pedestrian is going to get across that intersection. and how, if that's the design that's, the base design, how we can do that as safe as possible. Where's the best place for them to be? If we're gonna spend money widening the bridge, can we improve their experience going across that bridge? And I was concerned around item 2.6. It says complete streets and transit integration, complete streets improvements opportunity will be identified to only address means of active transportation, such as walking and bicycling, only along a couple onlys, only along adjacent arterials that would be impacted by the proposed build alternatives. So when I read that there's not going to be any accommodations or any considerations for pedestrian and bicyclists on Fair Oaks. I don't know if that's what their intention is. Maybe we can clear that up. I think that should be a consideration in every alternative. And if you think about adjacent arterials, you don't have many because you have Fremont, you have Orange Grove, and you have Grand and Arroyo. I guess those would be the only alternatives to go north-south across the Arroyo Seco Parkway. So if we could get some clarification on that, I think that'll be an important part of strengthening this project. But thank you for the opportunity to review it. Any questions from fellow commissioners or Commissioner or Mr. Zanya, Mr. Pena? Do you have any?
No, this is all great feedback. This is what we actually wanted to hear from other commissioners, just some feedback to further refine the scope of work. We'll review all the comments and try to refine this, meet with the consultant. And then after that, also try to schedule something with LA Metro and Caltrans as well on the next steps, and then eventually finding a future date to present this item to the city council.
Okay. And Commissioner Fisher, I think, has one more comment, but I want to ask,
Sure.
you mentioned a meeting with presentation to LA City Council. Did
I say LA City Council?
You said LA City.
Oh,
Is
I
that
just- I
LA
misspoke.
Metro?
Yeah, LA
Okay.
Metro. Yeah.
Just
sorry.
want to clarify. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, it was stated several times, I heard this, that the bridge might be widened. It's my understanding that there was never a proposal to widen the bridge because the bridge is the original 1940 original fabric of the freeway. And it was my understanding that because it is a historic parkway that is sometimes overseen by a statewide group whose name I don't remember, but they look to see that the historical character of the parkway is maintained. It was inadvisable to recommend any widening of the bridge. So my understanding of the proposal is that the existing Fair Oaks Avenue Bridge over the parkway would not be widened. Once you get beyond the bridge structure, then that's when the modifications start. So if I'm wrong on that, please advise me. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and I think what Commissioner Zavala said and what Commissioner Dunlap said, I think is important. And that is, this is a bottleneck relief project, congestion relief project. We know that this location is the biggest bottleneck in the city of South Pasadena. Not all bottleneck projects that improve vehicle circulation are necessarily bike projects or transit projects or bicycle projects. So we're going to be asked in this process as we move down the line with it, well, where are the bicycle features? Where are the pedestrian features? And I think we should keep that in mind. And I think you should start documenting what they will be. And there will be many. For example, for this and for the other related projects that you have, such as the Rogan improvements with signal timing and such, you're gonna be having special detectors to better detect bicyclists. You're going to be having some sort of bus priority. You're going to retime the signals to reflect the more current Caltrans MUT, California MUTCD requirements for the slower pedestrians. You're going to have accessible pedestrian signals from our previous discussions of the Rogan project, you're going to be doing those things. And I think it should be stated that also, and you should get credit for that. It's a related project. I think also for this one, you're going to be having a pedestrian refuge island between the on-ramp and the State Street. That little triangular piece is going to be a pedestrian island with accessible ramps and such. I think we should be documenting all the improvements and related improvements with other projects that will fold into this one. And maybe that could be made available as a separate separate exhibit or separate glossary or whatever to this, because we are going to be asked that. And there are many things that you will be doing to improve transit times, to improve bicycle facilitation, and to improve pedestrian crossings. So we want to make sure that those who are most concerned about pedestrians, bicyclists, etc., feel that they are getting something out of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Pena, maybe you can clarify and just confirm what Commissioner Fisher said. And thank you for bringing up the comment about the bridge and, you know, whether it be widened or not. I think there's probably a little bit of confusion about that. Is it, you know, is Commissioner Fisher correct that we'll need to stay within the existing bridge?
Yeah, from my understanding is that it's going to remain within the existing bridge, the design.
Okay.
But we can definitely, you know, confer with, you know, the design that the consultant produced and get that information as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Abelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two quick things. That's my understanding as well, that there isn't any bridge widening. I know we've been talking about this since 2017, and I don't think that's ever been part of the plan. Second and final, do you have a projected date for when you plan to go to City Council with this proposal? Approximately, just trying to get a sense. No, I'm not trying to pin you down.
If everything goes as scheduled, you know, with Metro and meeting with Caltrans, potentially September, or it could be maybe October or later in the fall. It's just depending, you know, meeting with Caltrans and Metro.
Sure.
Just getting both of them on the same conversation at the same time and discussing, and if we need to have any follow-up meetings and making sure we're well enough prepared to move the task order to City Council.
Right. Okay.
That makes sense.
Understood.
Yeah.
And if maybe if you could, when we meet, just keep us updated on when you have a better sense of when you're going to council with this, that would be great.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I would just add, like just given the scope of the project and just how big it is, we definitely want to do our due diligence and just make sure that we cover everything. So we're ready once we present it to council and getting all those refinements and that input and that at least preliminary discussions with Caltrans and Metro.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
So I see this is listed as an information item, but then the staff report says has a recommendation. Are you looking for a recommendation on this right now? Like a vote? I don't know about everyone else. I wouldn't be comfortable voting that we move forward with this scope of work as is. I think everyone's kind of brought up. My fellow commissioners might feel differently, but you know, what are you looking for as far as like a recommendation from the commission?
Well, part of the reason, like I mentioned earlier, was to bring this item to the commission with this specific scope of work that the consultant had prepared. Again, we also had some questions that needed refinement, similar to some of your concerns that you guys had expressed to us, but we definitely wanted to give you guys, the commission an opportunity to provide comment and feedback to ensure that, you know, this was the direction we want to go to, and as well as include any other input and comments to potentially include in the scope of work. So then we can move forward with the next step, which would be to talk with Caltrans and Metro. So not necessarily.
Okay. So we've done our job this evening.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And unless there's anything else, we'll go ahead.
David, just at one point, when they're doing the analysis, I'm assuming they're going to add a price tag to the alternatives. Look at 6 and end up with 3 or whatever. There'll be some numbers attached estimates. So when you're analyzing that, people have a consideration of costs.
Yeah, from my understanding is that there would be an associated cost once they refine the alternatives. I believe I can't pinpoint it right now where in the scope it was mentioned, but I believe I did read something about that in here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Public Works staff, for your work on this project, and commissioners for your questions, and public Tucker for your comments. Appreciate it. We will move to our next item. It is an action item, approval of the meeting minutes from our Tuesday, July 18th, 2020. Oh, sorry. We will go to our project status update. My bad. Information item 3, project status update. Want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I'll do my best to try to give you an update on the projects that we worked on. So the first one, I'm just going to go down the list as they're usually presented like in past meetings. So the update on the mission in Fremont, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So contract is in the process of being executed with negotiation of terms and conditions near to complete. So I'll run down through all the projects, and then if it's okay, then we can have Q&A if that's okay with the commission. Okay. So the next project is the street improvements. There was a groundbreaking event that was held on July 25th. So we're just trying to determine the community notification to begin. The original design consultant has submitted the new bid package, which is being reviewed by the project team. So at this moment, the staff will engage with the city manager's office to begin the community notification process. That's the update on that one. We also have an update on the Gravelia Street and Fair Oaks Avenue Measure M project. So the scope of work is being drafted. And then the funding agreement would be the next step. So part of that, developing a funding agreement and getting Metro to finalize things is to finalize the scope of work and get it over to them and provide them the projected costs and schedule of the project. So we're trying to finalize that for that specific project. The next project is the pedestrian crossing devices. That's another project that we're also finalizing the scope. And based on the MTech recommendations that we have received in the past, the crossing locations that will be prioritized are 3 specific intersections, which would be Fair Oaks and Spruce, Meridian and Bank, and Gravelia and Park. So again, this is to do pedestrian crossing devices improvements at these locations. The other update is the Fremont Huntington Mobility and Active Transportation and Mobility Improvement Projects. So our near-term improvements continue. A planning and community charrette process task order was approved by the City Council on July 19. So we went ahead, that was approved by the council on the 19th. So we're executing the contract with the consultant, and at the same time, as we mentioned in some of the previous meeting, we're trying to do also some short-term improvements along Fremont as well, and giving the community and a bi-weekly update of some of those changes. The sidewalks replacement and ADA ramps upgrades, the updated status. So the bid package is in development. Recently, some of our staff met with Los Angeles County Development Authority Community Division to ensure the funding requirements were met and to program funding for the next fiscal year. So the outcome of the meeting was direction to expand the scope of the project and to expend more funding in fiscal year 2023 in 2024. The Fair Oaks State Route 110 interchange loop hook on ramp is the item that was presented to the commission today. As mentioned, the next phase of this is to initiate our discussions with Caltrans and as well as Metro, and then go through that process. Let me see. The next update that I have is 2023-2024 slow streets and open street programs. Excuse me. As you heard some of the comments earlier that came today and some of the public comments that were emailed to the commission, and as well as the community listening session that we had yesterday, and the emails and phone calls that we have received regarding the slow streets. We've been receiving, excuse me, if you allow me, let me just backtrack on the installation process, and then I'll just get into some of the stuff that has happened just to go in a sequential order. So with the installation process, they're finalizing all the installation of delineators and the temporary tape. Most of the painting and the markings are complete, and those were done by one of the sub-consultants of the sub-consultant. So that's been completed. So right now, SGV is trying to finalize some of the delineators and taping at different intersections. I know there were still some questions about, when they were going to finish certain areas. So it is on their to-do list. I know they have some outstanding items on Grand and Columbia, as well as Oak and Milan, and some other areas, I believe, up in Hermosa that they still need to complete. Part of that delay was that they still needed some additional material. So they're scheduled to receive that material on Thursday. So they hope to have that installation complete by Thursday. If there's any other, delays or modifications that need to be done, then we'll certainly try to keep everyone apprised as best or as soon as possible. So again, the installation is almost to coming to a complete. And part of when maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago at the same time, our team started documenting a lot of the feedback we've been receiving from the residents, just keeping a log of all the phone calls and emails that we're getting regarding the slow streets. So we're keeping a log of all that information and just tracking all the comments, suggestions, questions. Sometimes residents would ask for the plans. They want to see what's going to go on their particular intersection. So we've been collecting all that feedback. And more recently, last week, we started getting additional comments specifically on Grand Avenue regarding the bike lane that was installed. So as a result of that, we scheduled a community listening session on yesterday, 2 different ones where we had residents, approximately 30 plus residents that came out in person and provided comment and feedback to us. And our team also explained the background and the genesis of the program, and explained that the program was also temporary. And residents, as you might have heard some of the comments earlier, definitely expressed concerns about the aesthetics of the bike lane, comments about being unsafe, concerns about the limited outreach that was conducted at the initial onstage back in 2021. The criteria that was used to select the some of these streets, and there were questions about the criteria about that. And there were certain residents who had concerns about the bobouts, as you heard in some of the earlier comments. And some of the residents also made some suggestions, particularly for Grand Avenue, focusing on making other improvements such as speed humps or vehicle radar or radar signage at that location. So that's kind of the update for the slow streets. For the neighborhood traffic management program implementation, so software workflow development is underway. The city council approval of the amended software contract is required. For Ramona Avenue, Oak Street, Rollins Street, and Fremont traffic management, some of our staff has been working on the student. The student parent outreach is in progress with the installation that is currently being scheduled. So this is in reference to the temporary drop-off and pickup zone on Fremont in front of the South Pasadena High School. So staff has been closely coordinating with the school district and parent-teacher association to distribute the flyer. And we have secured the necessary signage and is ready for installation. So we're just trying to coordinate an installation date and a distribution of the flyer to the school and the parents. And then timing improvements at Orange Grove and Monterey Signal. So we circle back with the consultant. I know there were previous questions about these intersections. So the consultant did make revisions to the traffic signal timing sheets. So the city maintenance contractor did update the traffic signal timing and adjusted the video call detectors in all directions because they identified that some of these detectors were not detecting the vehicles at certain locations. So they made a couple of recommendations with the exact location where those video calls needed to be positioned. So we had our maintenance contractor make those adjustments. So based on that feedback, if there's additional feedback regarding these intersections or there's additional modifications that need to be done, then we can certainly circle back with the consultant to get feedback on that. Similar for the timing improvements I mentioned in Garfield, they did a revision to the traffic signal timing sheet. The only difference with this specific intersection is that the intersection operates on a fixed time and has no loop detectors, no pet heads, and no push buttons. So the city maintenance contractor uploaded the new traffic signal timing at this location. For the 66 Golden Streets Arroyo Fest, so city planning efforts are underway. So the memorandum of agreement is being reviewed by the city attorney. SGV, the COG, shared the MOA with us, and our staff was reviewing the final language and the language on the MOA, and it's currently with the city attorney reviewing the final language, and we're waiting to get that back so then we can send it over to SGV, the COG, and then so we can execute the agreement. Traffic impact analysis, proposed development traffic study nearing completion. So there was a second draft review by staff. So staff are working with the developer team and a traffic study consultant to complete the second review of the traffic evaluation for a proposed project at the southwest Fair Oaks and Gravellia. Consultant provided a second draft of the study based on staff's comments. So we do have some of our staff working with the consultant on the traffic study and providing comments. The two last ones, Huntington Drive and Marengo Avenue Crossing Guard at evaluation. The item was approved by the city council at the July 19 meeting. And then Marengo Avenue Traffic Safety Assessment. That's a task order that was also approved on July 19 by the city council as well. And the contract is being executed with the consultant. So those are all the updates that we have for the public works.
Thank you, and thank you for walking us through those. We will go one by one and see if anyone has any questions. We'll try to keep our questions brief, so we can, if knowing that city staff is available afterwards or later this week, if we have any really, really specific questions, but I'll try to limit us at 15 to 20 minutes for this item, hopefully under 15. But we'll start with Commissioner Zavala.
Chair Dunlap, Before we begin, I just wanted to take a note that we do have a public comment,
All right.
a in-person public comment from Chris Miller, but it seems like he stepped out, but on the record, we just want to mention that.
Thank you.
I have no comment at the time. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Just a quick question, signal improvements at Mission and Garfield. You indicated that the new signal timing was uploaded. How did it change from the old timing?
I think that they gave additional I don't know the exact terminology, but I believe that they determined that one of the intersections didn't have sufficient green time, so they did add some additional green time at that intersection, from my understanding of it. But if we need to get a clarification on that, I'm happy to circle back with you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Abelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Responding to Commissioner Fisher's question, I don't have the answer, but I know that the concern that prompted the timing signal improvement or timing signal adjustment request was the low amount of time for Garfield traffic when compared to Mission traffic, that the majority of the traffic at that intersection is on Garfield, but Garfield was getting a woefully insufficient amount of green time and Mission was getting a lot, even though the traffic volume was low. So I'm hoping that the result was that the green time for Garfield went up. I don't know if that helps any.
Yeah, from my understanding, that was the case. But again, this is not to say like when we spoke to the consultant, he did mention if there's further modifications that need to be done, then we can definitely circle back based on the feedback that people see out there. If there's still a delay, then we can certainly convey that and they can consider that for modifications.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for making whatever the adjustments were at that intersection and Orange Grove and Monterey. Just a couple of quick questions, mindful of the chair's admonitions.
Sorry about that.
No, I appreciate it. Huntington Crossing Guard, second crossing guard. Okay, so I understand the city council approved that. That was not what was recommended in the consultant's report. There were other recommendations in the consultant's report to address concerns at that intersection. So the question is, are we looking at implementing any of the recommendations of the consultant for that intersection, or instead was basically a decision made that we're going to implement the second crossing guard or continue the second crossing guard and not look at those other options, at least at this point?
I think at the city council that happened in July 19, I think the approval was for just strictly to get the second crossing guard at that location, but there was no mention or further recommendation on any of the alternatives that had been presented by the consultant when they did the study. So there were no further recommendations to adopt or implement any of those suggested changes that we saw.
All
That
right.
answers the question.
I don't agree with that, but I appreciate your letting me know. So if we want to pursue it, that's something we'd have to talk about.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Slow Streets, thank you for all that you've done and thank you for getting it going. And I know there are folks in town who are concerned about it. We heard from 6 tonight. The listening sessions that were mentioned that happened yesterday, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you know how those were noticed? Like, do you know how people found out about those or participated in those? And there's no judgment here. It's just a question if you know. If not, it's fine.
So we did get the assistant of the city manager's office who helped coordinate that based on all the feedback that they were receiving from the public, the emails and phone calls. So something was quickly coordinated last week, and it was scheduled for Monday, which was yesterday.
Right.
So we got the assistance of the CM's office to coordinate that for us.
So it was the people who were expressing concern about it who
Yes.
were invited to, okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Do you have a time frame or when the high school loading zone on Fremont is actually going to appear? The school started today, I believe.
Yeah, so
I know this question is raised at every meeting, but it seems like we're very, very close, but I just wanted to get a sense.
so given that the obviously that the school started already, we felt that we wanted to get the buy-in as well of the school district and as well as the PTA. So there was some overlapping in the distribution and just getting some of that feedback. So we wanted to ensure we also got their feedback. So that's why there was a small delay in getting that out there before the school started. But we're hoping to have that sometime, hopefully sometime in August or early September, to move ahead with the installation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna nag
Sure.
as I do
Mhm.
every meeting because we need to get this done. And again, this is sort of like the slow streets, right? That it's something we're putting in or trying to put in to see if this will work. And if it doesn't work for some reason, it's easy to uninstall. And I just get concerned that we get so hung up on process that, I mean, there's been notification to everybody about this. That's who's affected. And I think there's buy-in. I thought the last piece was just notifying the school community, like parents and such, that it was happening. So I would just like to make sure that we close this loop and get this done so that we can implement it and start it and see what happens. I know you've heard that already, but anyway, when I hear early September, it makes me nervous because we're mid-August now and I'm hoping we're very close.
It's not slow streets, it's a slow process.
Right, right. So
I do want to assure you that it is a priority for us, for our public works teams. We just been finalizing the flyer and just like I mentioned earlier, just coordinating the efforts with the school district themselves and as well as the PTA, just finalizing. And now we have also the signage.
So you have
waiting
all
for
the
the
material you
signage.
need.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
No.
And last thing on slow streets, I believe at various locations there were supposed to be signs,
Yes.
right? And I haven't seen any of those yet. Is that part of what's going to start appearing in the next?
Yeah,
several
you are
days?
you are correct. The signage has not been installed yet. That's part of what they're gonna do on Thursday when they go out. They're gonna install the signage, and at that point, people will be able to see the QR code for the survey as well.
Perfect.
So that was scheduled to be the survey where the residents could provide feedback. But in addition to that, staff is also collecting feedback.
Sure.
From
No,
residents as well.
it seems like a very important PR
Absolutely.
outreach part of this. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Hughes, you're on the clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be quick. Just my pet peeve is again, the list of the street improvement projects. If we could kind of put together the list of, we've got this, but I want to make sure it matches up on where we are with our 2018, 19, 19, 20 lists. So we can check off and make sure everything's covered. Because I know some things we've already knocked off the list, but I just want to make sure that we've got clear, because when we had the complete, street meeting in April, that there were 4 bid packages, and want to make sure where we are with all those street improvement projects so we can know what is being covered, not covered, or what might still be out there. I know there were still some issues that we were looking at for potential Edison work or other things that might impact being able to do work on the street because there was other pending construction. So I had that. On the new project with pedestrian crossing, is that something too that we need to kind of notify the residents around those so that, again, they're not surprised that we're going to be doing these projects on these pedestrian crossing devices for Fair Oaks, Spruce, Meridian Bank, Gravalia Park, for those?
And I have, not to interrupt you, but I have a question on that too. I don't remember recommending those locations. And maybe that happened at a different meeting, but I know when we were doing the Measure M projects, we were talking a lot around Huntington, like Huntington and Maple and Huntington and one of the intersections down. And then, I've heard these just kind of anecdotally, I think we heard some public comment around Gravalia Park. And then some people in the community have brought up Meridian and Bank, but I don't ever remember us recommending that. I think there have been discussions around does the 6 million, can it cover the Huntington ones and then this money be shifted around? But at our last meeting last month, we had a lot of ideas for that 6 million, and I don't know how far that's going to go. And those devices on Huntington are going to cost some money too. So maybe we can get some clarification on or have that revised. And if these are the final locations,
Yeah,
let us know.
So just to clarify, you are right in that sense that there were more intersections at one point. The other two being Huntington and Maple, and then Huntington and Court. But given the limited funding that is available for this specific project, there's 5 different intersections, different widths of the traffic lanes at all these different intersections, with some of them probably costing more than others for the construction of them. Given that we also have the $6 million, active transportation and not ITS project, a $10 million project that we have for Fremont and Huntington, there's some funding available to also make some improvements on Huntington as well as part of those 2 projects. And in addition to that, there's also the new HSIP Cycle 11 projects, which also allocate some money for Huntington Drive as well for some improvements. So, but this is not to say that these are the final intersections that will move forward. As part of the funding agreement, we're going to present it as the 5 different intersections that we can move forward with. But it doesn't necessarily mean we have funding for all 5 of them for that specific scope of work, if that makes sense.
So sorry to interrupt
No,
you,
it's
Commissioner
fine,
Hughes,
'cause
but yeah, I just had a question about that and understanding that. Yeah, I understand this. So this Metro scope of work, this Metro MSP funding, you may not have that funding may not cover the device in Huntington, so you're using that money somewhere else, and then using HSIP and this $6 million to cover the Huntington devices. I guess I just don't want to lose sight of the Huntington crossings, given that that's the highest speed street in our city, and I think if I could put 1 device on Huntington or 2 of these other locations, or either if I could take out Meridian and Bank and Grevillea Park just because those are narrower streets and put 1 on Huntington, I would personally prioritize the 1 on Huntington. But that's just me, and we can agendize that and talk about that at a future meeting if we want to bring that back. But I'll turn it back over to
No,
Commissioner.
If I
totally
just-
agree.
if I can
That
say
was gonna
one-
Be a point, and the other is to make sure when we ever come up with these are the crosswalks before we do installation, make sure the community knows, so they're not surprised when these improvements are put into place. Also on the Fremont and Huntington active mobility, where we've got Fremont, Huntington, and Fair Oaks, the consultant is studying that. Do we know timing wise more on that? Possibly, obviously the city council just approved, but do we know when that's coming back from a consultant? Do we have a time frame? Are we thinking before Christmas?
You're referencing the Fremont Huntington Mobility Transportation?
Correct.
So right now
Like
we're,
when are we, the charrettes, like, do we have a time frame? I know, I think we'd looked at before the end of the year, but I just want to kind of get an idea, again, the timing.
so we're scheduled to have the charrettes in the fall. We haven't finalized the specific dates. Once we get those dates, we're certainly gonna share those dates so we can get concurrence as well to make sure that there are no conflicts with any city council meetings or city commission meetings as well. So we haven't gotten the calendar, but we are trying to schedule a meeting with the consultant to finalize those dates and identify them.
And then on the sidewalks and the ADA, just my question was, when we talk about it here, do we need to consider this budgeted or not budgeted? Because we're talking about expanding and I just want to make sure that, I guess there's going to be a discussion tomorrow, an update on the budget and the city council's agenda, and just kind of make sure that we're properly accounting for it. And I'm sure Director Gerber, but just that we don't get surprises because there's a lot of things that we're saying we're doing. And I know there's a lot of sources of funding, but I want to make sure we're covering everything. And it would be helpful if we could get a schematic of these are the projects similar to our list, but again, with the dollars and dollar sources of the funding associated, which I know we've asked for. On the projects that Chair Dunlap was just talking about, the highway safety improvement projects, the 11 with the various funding associated. Knowing that we're doing the bike lane discussion, again, I want to make sure that we are connecting to Alhambra and San Marino, so that we don't have bike lanes similar that just start and stop, which we've got over in the unincorporated area that they just did an event on next to Rosemead.
Okay.
After San Marino, before you get to Arcadia, because all of a sudden they just appear and then they stop. And the other question on the slow streets in the listening session that you did, we did not, if I'm aware, get notification of that. It would have been nice to know. We might want to participate or listen in. So if there are going to be listening sessions for any project, it would be nice for us to be aware of that. So should we desire to participate or listen in? And then you addressed my question about signage regarding the drop off for the school. Also on the updated status on the second draft on the traffic impact, I don't know if we've seen a first draft. So is that something that we're going to be getting, taking a look at? And my last is still concerns. I know I brought up this before, the timing of getting everything together for the Aurora Fest, because we're already mid-August. We haven't signed it yet. And have we been in contact with the chamber and other groups to be able to know that this big event is coming and whether there's a place for them as part of it, or whether there's outside sponsorships or funding that can make this better for the city?
So part of Active SUV's work that they do for all these open street events or Ciclovia or 626 Golden Street is to conduct some of this outreach as well to all the businesses where the specific streets are going to be closed. So they have a robust system where they do go out and talk to all the businesses that are going to be affected, how traffic is going to be impacted, and parking and how to access their business or their driveways for that specific day. So Active SUV has been sharing a lot of those flyers, and they have been communicating with a lot of these affected areas that are going to be impacted by the closures of this. And we also are going to have like an internal department meeting as well to coordinate any of the other services that we're going to have for that particular day.
Because when we did the one from Mission to San Gabriel, when was it? A couple years ago, San Gabriel had really put the efforts forward to have a lot of activity with their businesses, with their groups, with their fire trucks, with their police, obviously on the side, but activities for kids and all of the stuff that San Gabriel brought to the event itself. And I just want to make sure that we have sufficient time and notification to everybody to really use this as a showcase for the city and our businesses and the activities and the volunteer groups and such that could take advantage of this traffic and attendance. I just don't want to lose the opportunity
Sure.
we can do it. But thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Actually, I do have one small question.
Go ahead.
Just a really quick question about the way that the survey's going to be conducted using the QR code and everything like that. Will the survey be anonymous, or will it be more trying to look for citizens of South Pasadena specifically and their feedback?
I think the way that they developed this survey, some of the questions are going to be optional. In case if someone doesn't want to answer a specific question, I think they can leave it blank. But part of that survey also includes metro-related questions, which are required to be on that survey. But again, they don't necessarily have to be answered. So some of them can be left blank, as some of our previous surveys have typically are designed That answers your question.
I guess so. I'm just more wondering if people can like, if there is gonna be a possibility that somebody can take the survey multiple times or could possibly like spam the survey as well.
So if I remember correctly, I think this question might have come up, or I might have brought it up with the consultant, whether someone could submit multiple submissions. And I'll have to confirm, but I believe at the time they had mentioned that it was one survey per person.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And my main comment was related to the pedestrian devices, or my main question, I should say. But I do want to say thank you for implementing the Slow Streets program. I know that it's been a lot of work. I wish that my street was a slow street. And I know that it probably hasn't. I guess I was a little surprised at so much. I guess I was and I wasn't surprised. I know that the city has sent out mailers, if I'm not correct, to those residents, and we've had meetings on it. And this has been an item that's been agendized at various commission meetings. So it's great to hear that there's been a commitment recently to work with residents on maybe improving the bike lanes. I think we heard some feedback of there are some locations where it pushes them too close to cars, and if there are opportunities or safety things or design modifications that need to be made, I think that's the feedback that's probably most helpful that we want to receive. And again, if we can at all be informed of any future listening sessions, I would just be curious to kind of hear that too. And then also, when you like a project, you always don't think to go out and submit to tell someone you like it. If there are projects that you like, I would encourage us to, write those engineers or those cities. Make sure that that's known too. But it's I guess it's good to hear that even with maybe it's not ideal in the sense that it's not perfect for everyone, that there is a commitment from the city to hear those residents out and work with it to make it as good as possible for as many people as possible. So thank you for that. And with that, I'll go to our action item, which is our meeting minutes from our last meeting. I know I have a small edit, but I'm sure Commissioner Vice Chair Hughes, do you want to get us started?
I had just a couple. One was the typo. That's my fault under public comment, page 1, under Brandon Fox, the second line, there is a concern that they're missing an R. And on the next page, under project status update, on the
I'm sorry,
time,
where is that?
under via Zoom, Brandon Fox. And then the second line, the concern is there isn't missing an R.
Oh, okay. I brought it up because in your notebook is a red line,
Oh, okay.
which
Sorry.
reflects my suggested revisions that I sent
Ah,
to staff
I'll look at that. Oh.
last night. That addresses what you just said. So I
and
just wanted to
then
make sure everybody,
I realized that there is also a typo on this,
I just want to make
next-
sure we're all working from the same.
on the second page where we have the date of the groundbreaking. I believe it's 10 o'clock, not 100.
Where is it?
Under project status update, 10 o'clock, not 10 a.m. as opposed to 100, 10 a.m. So those were my two. So thank you for this updated draft.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hughes. It seems that Commissioner Abelson addressed a lot of or the comments that I had. Commissioner Fisher, do you have any?
I had one that I had sent in, but I guess I addressed it to Liana and not you, so it wasn't received. It would be the second full paragraph on page MTIC 27. I didn't understand the paragraph as written, so I tried to rewrite it. So bear with me. I'm going to come up with whole new words. If I can read my own handwriting. So we'd eliminate that sentence or paragraph as it reads and replace it with.
Sorry, Commissioner Fisher, could you just, because I'm working from the red line, could you just tell us which paragraph, which section
on page MTIC 27, where it begins with Commissioner Fisher first, second full paragraph.
Okay,
Oh, okay. This one, Commissioner Fisher commented that it's important in the planning process.
okay. I had, maybe, okay, sorry, go
Do we
ahead.
have you have a different page? Or?
No, I was just working off the red line and we don't have an MTIC number at the bottom, so I wanted to make sure
Oh,
I was with you.
okay.
Apologies.
I'd replace it with Commissioner Fisher said that after hearing public feedback, it is vital that the project feature that the project features be developed only after the consultant conducts objective studies to determine collision patterns, congestion bottlenecks, speeding, and such. We should avoid the tendency to identify solutions before documenting the problem. So, sorry.
No, you're good. You mentioned you emailed this information to Liana?
Yeah.
Okay, I will connect with her and then have that updated for you and then provide a signature.
That's fine. That's fine.
Thank you, Mark. Anything else? Commissioner Zavala?
Not at the moment, thank you.
All right. With that, I'll move to approve the minutes as amended.
I would second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion carries, minutes approved. See, that takes us to city council liaison communications.
I just have a couple of things to say. Since the city basically went dark over the last month, at the last meeting here with all the commissions meetings, I don't have anything to offer there. David Penner pretty much updated everything that happened at the last council meeting. I was going through it, you pretty much covered everything. So it goes my talk. But what I did want to address is a question from Larry about notification of the slow streets, a question from Commissioner Hughes about the same thing. Even you jumped in at the end here, Eric, with kind of a roundabout way of saying what happened there. I want to add something here, tell you more about it. There was no notification. Okay. And I had many calls on Saturday and Sunday, happens to be in my district. And people would say to me, well, there's a meeting tomorrow. Well, one Sunday calls saying that. I said, what time? What meeting? Then after the third or fourth phone call, I asked the question, do you have that in writing or maybe an email that I could see? Yeah, it's here. And okay, here's my email address. Anyway, nothing came in. Okay, this was maybe a good analogy. The sky is falling and the word of mouth. One side of the coin, that's really good to see that the city, the people who live here can organize that quick. I mean, for those of you who are not here, there were probably maybe 25 people. We just moved the chairs out of the way. I happen to have an agenda prep at the same time, which conflicted, and I stuck my head in for the 10 or 15 minutes in the beginning of it. And there was an angry group of people there. And I think that the city, and we all bear a responsibility for this. One person informed me that, yes, I did okay this on the, I think it was the June meeting on page 722, item number 30. I and the other council members did okay, that slow streets projects. Okay. Yes, we did. Okay, but the notification didn't, there was no formal notification. These people showed up, came from word of mouth. They were Grant Street residents, and the city did the best they could to accommodate the people in a very short period of time. I had a meeting area here. Ted was here. I think Tanner was here. I don't know if David was here, and a few of the city staff that were available. And we took 2 microphones, let the people vent. But it's a lesson to be learned from not just one, not from one group, not from probably the public works that were painting it. It was the notification. We didn't do it right. And we have more slow streets coming in. And I think that's what Commissioner Hughes mentioned that, what's going on now? We have another couple of projects coming right up. Am I correct with that? On top of the one on Grand? Is there something I think there's a couple more that are just starting too.
I
But
think you make a point where if you think about our city, we've been very transportation poor in lots of projects for many years. So,
I
for
don't
us
wanna
to
pick-
do things is a very exciting, but I think we need to take the proper notification and step process, meaning that we almost would have the meeting before, show the design, show where they're going to go, say it's temporary, this is what's going in, we put them in, and then, people then can see it in reality and make comments and do a listening session even before and after. But it is like all of a sudden the new designators on Oak. I don't know if anyone on Oak has heard about those.
But as
There was
far
a
as
meeting
future
or-
projects.
Yeah,
Right
but-
now,
right.
I think
Right.
that the
But I
main
mean,
one
yeah,
would
we
be
need to
the,
develop our
the main one would be
process
the
to
mission.
do it correctly.
the mission project and the
Right,
mission. Yeah, that would be
exactly.
the main one.
Okay, so anyway, it's a lesson to be learned. Okay, and it wasn't done right this time, and make sure we'll do it right for the next time. And just a few adjustments, and no one person to blame. It just happened. Okay, and then we got to make sure it doesn't happen again. Okay, I'm not supposed to be talking at these meetings. I'm supposed to be listening, and that's another thing. Listening session. I think that's the first time I ever heard those two words together was tonight. Few people here, we have a listen because no one knew what to call it. These people showed up and we had a listening session. They listened to why this happened. Weren't happy with it. Weren't happy about the notification, but at least we got a word out later on and we said, no, we'll see what can be done about it. Nobody promised anybody anything, but we learned. Okay. And I think it was important. I brought it up for this commission tonight. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Donovan. With that, we'll go to Commissioner Communications. Commissioner Zavala.
Nothing at the moment. I hope everybody has been having a good August and yeah, that's enough for me.
All right, I have been. Commissioner Fisher.
I'd like to touch on communicating with our public on the projects that we implement. I thought it was good that we had a flyer that was put on each porch of those residents on Grand Avenue. At least I got my flyer, so I knew that it was happening. But I think it's vital that we listen to the residents on the street. I think the hearing session's a good idea if it can be communicated in advance. But I just wanted to caution that I think that we should understand that Grand Avenue residents are not the only stakeholders in this process. Certainly, they are very interested in what transpires on their street, but for those persons who live on Sterling Place, they need to drive on Grand Avenue to get to their homes. Those who live on Floral Park Terrace, one block to the east, need to use Grand Avenue. So there's stakeholders other than those on Grand Avenue. I think it's vital that we hear from the bicyclist community and hear what they have to say about the bicycle lanes. Do they feel that it's made things safer for them? Or do they feel that it's too restrictive and that it requires you to ride single file rather than kind of abreast as often happens there? So I think there's a lot of stakeholders we need to hear from before this is concluded. One other thing is I understand that in the master plan of bikeways in this city, Grand Avenue is not shown, so that I think it would be clean ultimately if it is determined that the bike lane should become permanent, that the bikeway plan be amended to reflect that bikeway plan adopted by council. Thank you.
Commissioner Abelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to try to cram it into 3 minutes. It might be 4. First, just something I intended to mention earlier to David when we were going through the projects. when they go out to finish the slow streets implementation, whether it's Thursday or whatever day it is, reminder, it might be a good idea to make sure those no parking signs are put up in advance so that areas that need to be, still need treatment are actually available. So I know there was at least one location where the no parking signs had disappeared and then they went out and then the area was blocked. They couldn't do the work. So just a thought wherever those spots are. Second, I want to thank everyone who came. I think we heard from 7 people regarding slow streets. It'll be great to hear from everybody else in the community who uses these streets and hears from them or travels over them. I mean, I know just the Grand Hermosa area has over 100 residents. So it'd be great to hear from more people, and I know we will. And I appreciate the opportunity for them to do that. In that regard, I know you're going to put the signs up with the QR codes. Maybe it's already in the works, no pun intended, but it might be a good idea to publicize the fact that there is a place where people can go to submit feedback, positive or negative, whether it's through the city, I think it's the City Hall Scoop or something like, and the various press releases and such, and maybe information to the media, South Pasadena and South Pass Review saying, hey, the program's been implemented, right? We want your feedback, whatever it is, here's where you go. Just to give people every option, only once, hopefully, to Commissioner Zavala's point. I wanted to point out that, you know, for tonight's meeting, we had in writing one set of comments with concerns about Grand Avenue. And there was also one from a gentleman named Casey Law on behalf of South Pass Active Streets. He wasn't here tonight, but I thought it was important just to hear this side of it too, so that we have a sort of a balanced view. And then I have one other thing and I'll stop. He says, a first big thank you for the slow streets being built in our city. Slowing automobiles and dedicating space for bicycles is a proven strategy to improve street safety and encourage sustainable transportation. Our air quality will be better for it, and our city's contributions to climate change will be reduced. Perhaps even more importantly than that, our city's kids love it. The Grand Avenue Slow Street was implemented just in time for the start of the new school year. SPAS, this is the group he represents, helps escort kids to school in a quote bike unquote bike bus. And kids riding to Arroyo Vista Elementary got to enjoy the Grand Avenue bike lanes on the first day of school. It is hard to describe the joy of seeing children enjoying riding to school. That it was important for us to hear that too. It's nice to hear both sides. 2 other quick things. I think her name was Ann Miller, a resident on Charter Oak, I think at Grand, expressed some concerns about her street, which is certainly used as a cut through, and particularly folks blowing the stop sign on westbound Charter Oak at Grand. Enforcement is very scarce in our town. It would be great, perhaps, if we could suggest some spot enforcement where possible at that location by the police department for folks blowing the stop sign. I can send a note too. Last, former Mayor Mike Tan spoke at the top of the meeting hours ago about the very unfortunate Orange Grove accident with which we're all very familiar. It's the latest in a never-ending series of accidents on that street. Every other week, there's an accident on Orange Grove, typically between Columbia and the freeway. And it's poor design. And we have street lights that are out. We know about the issues, and we have a long-term plan to address it. I'm wondering if maybe there are some things short-term that we can do where the 2 lanes become one at that curve at Oliver Street. It would be nice because I know the other project is a long-term project. Last, we've talked about earlier, the problem primarily is the 2 lanes narrowing down to 1 on southbound Orange Grove at Oliver, which is exactly where this last accident happened. We talked months ago about approaching the city of Pasadena about reducing the lanes from 2 to 1 north of Columbia instead of south, right at that sort of dangerous curve. And I know previously Pasadena wasn't enthralled with the idea. They were concerned about the backup of traffic in their city north of the intersection. I'm wondering if because of this latest tragedy, then it might be an opportunity for us to go back to them and discuss the possibility of reducing the lanes north of the intersection. I know it's a situation we created decades ago when we did the work on Orange Grove, but maybe there's a way for the cities to work together to alleviate the problem, at least short term. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Abelson. Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank David and Antenna for being here tonight. And also I wanted to acknowledge the tragedy that took place over the weekend with the accident and the death. And I think a lot of that kind of relates to what we're talking about tonight with slow streets and safe streets and speeding, because we've heard it on many, many different thoroughfares in the city, whether it's Meridian, whether it's down Fremont or other streets, Huntington, of course, and the 2000 block. But I think it's, I think we need to applaud our Public Works and Transportation team and working with this commission to look at options, ways that we can mitigate these situations, whether it's striping and lining, improving signage, improving what we've done with stop signs, what we've done with various mitigation efforts. And again, the slow streets is something where we can test out some mechanisms with funding that we received and to see what works. And we're looking for that feedback from our residents and businesses so that we can improve situations going forward. So I think it's exciting. I think we can work on our communication process and timings as far as getting out above, ahead of the projects, communicating to the residents and then showing them and then implementing. But I also want to thank that there were some very distinct potholes on Orange Grove, just coming off the 110 freeway exit going southbound on Orange Grove, that I saw a couple cars really take some good tire damage. And I can see that you guys have mitigated that. So I know I called and you guys took care of that. So that was great. And again, thank you for being so responsive. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. No real comments except thank you, Public Works. Thank you for your hard work and your responsiveness. And you guys do a great job. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to you if you have any communications. None. Mark, do you have anything?
I don't have anything.
All right.
Oh.
So
Really quick question about the binders. Do you need us to keep them here with the content inside, by the way?
Yeah, definitely. We can have a conversation about that after.
sorry.
Okay, yeah, good.
all right. With that, it is 8:57 p.m. and I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.